It's rather evident that each person has a role model, or someone they respect, admire, and look up to. What this generally implies is that they idolize their role model to some degree by attempting to emulate their beliefs, values, and behavior. A simple but obvious example of this phenomenon is children emulating their parents' behavior, such as a son copying his father's mannerisms. Even though each person has a role model, or someone whom they model their attitude and behavior after, this begs a set of questions. Are role models necessary? Phrased differently, do we need to have role models in order to function properly and be successful? Furthermore, if role models are necessary, then how important are they in terms of forging our own values and character? Today's discussion provides an analysis of these questions, beginning with ascertaining a role model's characteristics. Once that's finished, the next step will be determining the necessity of role models, or why they're vital, along with the constructive purposes they serve. Finally, the last step will be examining the practical implications of having a role model, in addition to the detrimental consequences of lacking positive role models. To begin, how are role models typically defined, and how do these assumptions influence our perception of role models? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a role model as, quote, a person whose behavior in a particular role is imitated by others, end quote. Unsurprisingly, this definition fits the typical interpretation. If role models are people whose behavior should be emulated, then what types of people are we talking about? Essentially leaders and trailblazers, people who lead by example, exceptional individuals in thought and action, or people who embody any set of values and behaviors that others wish to emulate. Professional athletes, actors, musicians, CEOs, authors, and political figures evidently come to mind. By virtue of their influence and media attention, they'll automatically be considered role models whether they're positive or negative, and whether they wish to be or not. Professional athletes are a given due to their exceptional physical abilities, work ethic, and dedication to their craft. Even among professional athletes, the legends are considered beyond exceptional because they seem to be in a league of their own. Michael Jordan for basketball, Wayne Gretzky for hockey, Tiger Woods for golf, Lionel Messi for soccer. The list goes on and on. Indeed, when I think of role models, professional athletes instantly come to mind. Part of this is likely due to my bias towards athletics, since I grew up playing ice hockey, but even among non-athletes, these people are respected. Why? The answer is because they embody abnormally exceptional behavior, an extremely high work ethic, passion, and dedication to their craft not typically found in the general population. They aren't normal in the usual sense because if they were, then they wouldn't be exceptional. Additionally, the fact that they're professional athletes makes them exceptional by definition, which is far from normal or average. I'm sure you understand what I'm asserting at this point, which is, role models are usually perceived as extraordinary people worth emulating in some respect. When I was growing up, one of my role models was Sidney Crosby. I held him in great regard due to his immense work ethic on the ice, but also for his character off the ice. Indeed, I sought to emulate his dedication towards hockey by practicing for many hours on end, but also to remain humble no matter how skilled I became. As mentioned earlier, professional athletes and other high-profile figures will become role models for other people, whether they like it or not, simply due to their influence and media attention. However, regular individuals are also role models for the people around them. This typically includes family, friends, acquaintances, and coworkers, but strangers can also be listed. Parents will be role models for their children, older siblings will be role models for their younger siblings, and so on. The point is that you and the people around you are role models whether you realize it or not. We influence and are continually influenced by others. This relationship is evidently reciprocal in terms of affect. I affect others, just as others affect me. What these premises and sub-conclusions reveal is that role models are in fact necessary because we instinctively emulate others. Even if we're cognizant of it, we cannot escape the fact that we're role models to others, and others are role models to us. So yes, we do require role models. Good role models, actually. because our behavior is evidently influenced by others and modeled after those we revere. Here's another personal illustration to demonstrate the necessity of role models, in addition to the constructive purpose that they serve. Like many sons in their formative years, my dad was my principal role model. I sought to emulate his character and values. I respected him, and I listened earnestly to the advice that he provided, especially when I struggled. A large portion of this occurred with hockey, where he was my biggest supporter and coach. He instructed me in areas that required improvement by communicating what I needed to hear, rather than what I wanted to hear. Tough, but also compassionate and fair. When I failed to make teams that I tried out for, he didn't berate me for it. Instead, he noted that although my effort wasn't good enough, this didn't imply it wouldn't be sufficient next time. Failure isn't the end because you can return from it. If you're willing to put in the work and effort, then I'll help you get to where you want to be. I'll provide the guidance and support that you need to succeed. That's essentially what he did, and although it seems strict or unfair at times, growing older helped me understand why those actions were necessary. In order to continue down the right path, we require a fair bit of chastising every now and then. As kids and teenagers, we think we know everything, but looking back, I realize how foolish I was during some of those years. I needed my erroneous values and behaviors to be rebuked so I could become better. Positive role models who actually care about your well-being will do that. They'll support you, but they'll also reprimand detrimental behaviors when they arise. In my case, many of the values and behaviors I continue to possess originate from my dad. I certainly realize that I would be a much different person if he weren't around, and I can only speculate on what type of person I would be without his influence. Values such as strength, resilience, and humility were passed down to me by him. But I can't give him all the credit though, since my mother played just as large of a role in passing down those values. Although we don't see eye to eye on everything these days, many of our core values are the same. Evidently, role models influence and formulate behavior, which can either be positive or negative. It's not difficult to realize the merits of role models because they're necessary in order to facilitate constructive actions and values. Parents need to be positive role models for their children so they can emulate their behavior and become successful adults. CEOs and bosses need to be positive role models so employees see the value in listening to their authority. Role models don't always have to be well liked, but if they're respected, then their behavior will be emulated. If they aren't respected, then their behavior won't be emulated and nobody will heed their advice. Fundamentally, to summarize this section, role models are essential to set the standard, push for continued improvement of themselves and others, and to reassure the people around them. Equally important, they're essential to guide the next generation not only for individuals, but also for specific occupations such as doctors, lawyers, accountants, and political leaders. From a societal standpoint, or on a macro scale, positive role models are absolutely necessary not only for the maintenance of a community as it currently stands, but also for its future survival. The concluding section will expand further on the practical consequences of role models, especially when positive role models are absent. To witness this phenomenon in practice, look no further than the growing fatherlessness crisis, not just in America, but other countries as well. For the boys and young men who don't have a father or suitable father figure around, the results are evidently detrimental. If they have a brother or brothers around to guide them, then this might suffice even though brothers won't be able to completely fill the void of an absent father. For those who don't even have a brother or brothers, the results tend to be far more catastrophic. Without a brother to serve as a positive role model, they'll latch onto almost any figure in search of guidance. Evidently, this is what they're seeking, guidance, since they don't know all the answers by virtue of their youth. Now, nobody has all the answers, but keep in mind that children automatically look towards older people for direction, even if they aren't the most exemplary figures. Unfortunately, for many of these boys and young men, they begin to idolize the wrong person or group of people. They'll join gangs in order to feel like they belong and engage in behaviors they otherwise wouldn't do if they had a positive role model. This behavior is performed to fill the void, an attempt to dull the emotional pain from feeling neglected and abandoned. Lashing out in anger and frustration tends to occur more often, along with a lack of emotional regulation. Because they haven't been taught to properly regulate or channel their emotions, the violent outbursts are a result of that lack in guidance. Not all fatherless sons and children exhibit these characteristics, but what we're finding is a strong correlation between absent fathers or positive father figures and destructive behaviors among affected youth. This is merely one example, and I won't confine the core message to just sons. Daughters need their fathers, or positive father figures, to be present, since a father's absence affects them as well, sometimes even more than a son. Note that I'm assuming either parent isn't a danger to the child. In that case, hostile parents are to be kept away. In a perfect world, there would be no absent parents, but unfortunately we know that our world isn't perfect and we must contend with its consequences. Anyhow, in addition to good fathers, good mothers are also necessary, and it's a shame how motherhood continues to be looked down upon in contemporary society, along with fatherhood. This likely stems from the reprehensible view that children are parasitic and a hindrance, rather than an immense joy and blessing. All of these related problems stem from a multitude of views and causes. There isn't one magic bullet that will remedy these issues, since a multifaceted solution is required over a longer period of time. What that solution is, I can only speculate, but starting from the basics and expanding outwards by promoting positive role models is a good place to start. This also necessitates becoming a positive role model in your own environment, and not just demanding that more influential figures set the example or clean up their act. While that is also important, what will prove to be more effective in the short term is for many people to make incremental improvements in their own lives in terms of how they think and act. Becoming a positive role model that you can see as someone worth emulating, and for others to do so as well, is certainly a worthwhile endeavor. So, how should this be performed? One method is ascertaining your values and standing by them. Additionally, it's not sacrificing them when it's expedient to do so. Easier said than done, and something that all of us don't do 100% of the time, I know, but this should be an aspiration, nonetheless. Another method is treating others how you would like to be treated. The golden rule from Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Another quote that inspires me to become a better person says this, quote, "Be strong. You never know who you are inspiring." End quote. Indeed, I never know who I'm inspiring, and that's not arrogant of me to assert, since my conduct evidently influences others, even those I least expect it to. My parents, siblings, friends, and more. Your values and conduct indicate to others what you classify as acceptable, moral, and true. If you wish to bequeath particular values to others, your children, let's say, then you must set the example and stand by those values through your actions. If we're all role models, and we all have role models, then we should aspire to become the best role model that we can be. Think about how much better the world would be if that were the case. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing.